So a few weeks ago, I had an opportunity to preach, and I just shared with you what was on my heart about the reality that God has called us as His ambassadors. He has called us as His representatives, and He has put us here. You're here in Augusta County on a mission, and that mission is from God, and He has set you here to go out and to be in the world, but not to be of it. And when you go out into the world, you are His ambassador, and you're connecting with people, and you're loving people, and you're building bridges, but ultimately you are representing the values of our King. Right? Ultimately, you're representing the values of our sponsoring country as we are citizens of the kingdom of heaven, as Paul says in Philippians. And as a result of our citizenship and a result of the work that Jesus has done in our lives, we are to live in this world and be very different. The lives that we live should be marked by Jesus, and they should be very, very different than the people that are around us. Why are we different? We're different because we're transformed. We're different because we're actually new creatures, new creations. God has done a work inside of us. It says in Romans that we should walk according to the newness of life. That there's a new reality that has taken place inside of us that comes out, and it changes the way that we interact with it, changes the way we look, it changes the way we think, it changes the actions that come out of our lives, and therefore we are completely and utterly different. We're here. We're in this place. God has sent us here, but we are here and we are different in the way that we love, in the way that we serve, in the way that we bless, in the way we interact with the people that God brings into our path. 2 Corinthians 5:17 says, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. You see, it is God and God alone who has the power to create, and He has created something new in you through the work of Jesus. Paul also says in 2 Corinthians that we behold the glory of the Lord. See, there's a veil that's been removed, and as we see more and more clearly with that veil removed, we behold His glory, and as a result, we are transformed into the same image. In other words, as we look at and as we behold the glory of God, we begin to have that image imparted onto us, and we have and we bear the image of God. We are image bearers. We are intended to be like a mirror. We're intended to be like a mirror, and you have God in all of His glory in the heavenly realms, and His nature comes down and it bounces off of this mirror, and it's reflected into the world where we are. And so we're a mirror, and we're reflecting the beauty of God, and we're reflecting the character of God and the attributes of God and the love of God, so that everyone that's around us can behold His glory. And so you and I have been put here so that people can see the wonder and the glory of God through us. So we're His representatives. In the factories in Augusta County, in the schools in Augusta County, in the workplace in Augusta County, from the moment we wake up to the moment we put our head on that pillow, we're to be reflecting His love, serving like He would serve, and loving like He would love, and blessing like He would bless. Reflecting His attributes of goodness and mercy and compassion and gentleness, and reflecting His authority in the way that we build, and the way that we grow, and the way that we shape the community that we have been placed into. So we look different, and we are commissioned to go into this county and into this world bearing the image of Jesus, bearing the image of God. Now, The language of image, the image of God, is not or shouldn't be too unfamiliar to us. Way back in the beginning, creation, God describes the reality that he created humans in his image. He created Adam and Eve to bear his image before all of creation. So what does it mean then that we are his image bearers? What does it mean then that he has planted us in this place bearing his image? Let's go back to the very beginning, creation, chapters 1 and 2 of Genesis. We see here the power and the authority and the wonder of God as he creates everything out of nothing. And he brings order to the chaos, and he defines where the waters go, and he defines a space for the land, and he defines and he separates the skies. And then he takes these spaces that he has created, and he puts animals in them, birds and lights in the skies and in the heavens, and animals and plants on the ground and on the land, and fish in the water. And he looks at the waters and he says, "This far you shall come and no farther." He demonstrates his power and his might and his authority, and he creates everything out of who he is. And we know that all of creation bears the nature of God. Romans tells us, for his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and his divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. So no one is without excuse. Right? Creation itself bears the fingerprints of God. It demonstrates to us the power of God, the wonder of God, the marvelous intellect of God. Yeah, let's try that again. And all we have to do is step back and observe creation, and we get a glimpse of how amazing God is. The unchanging nature of the constant nature of the waves as they roll into shore, the vast nature of the oceans, the strength and the might of mountains towering out of the waters, and the precision of an eyeball, of how exact and precise everything has to be so that we can see, and little hummingbirds and their delicate pieces and parts. And God demonstrates to us who he is. Yet, there is something different about humans. There is something distinctly different about when God creates man and woman in the garden. This is what he says. Let us make man in our image and after our likeness. And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the heavens and over the livestock and all of the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Man, woman, they're made in his image. They're made after his likeness. We're created to bear and to carry and to reflect his likeness, his attributes to the world that's around us in a way that nothing else in creation can do. We are unique out of everything that he's made. And certainly we have different attributes like the capacity for intelligence. We can reason and we have logic. We can use reason and logic to build things and solve problems. And we have the capacity for relationship, to love and connect and serve. We have capacity to create, to invent and design and to grow and to multiply. And God takes this this being that he has made, and he says, hey, this being is made in my image, and this being has my attributes, and this being reflects a part of who I am, and he puts them right into the middle of the garden. And he says, now I'm going to use you, being, I'm going to use you to reflect my glory to everything else in creation. I'm going to use you to govern and to rule and to tend and to grow and to plant and to take care of this garden of the place where I'm putting you. And as the ones with this authority to rule and to govern, and as the ones that have my creative ability and my capacity, I'm going to have you fill the earth and cultivate it. And I'm going to have you be in charge. See, God didn't put a king in the Garden of Eden. But collectively, he puts people in the Garden of Eden to run and to rule and to tend the garden. He commissioned these living beings to represent him in the Garden of Eden. And as they tend and as they care for and as they live, it should reveal the very heart of God for his creation. So here we have these images of God that are set in his garden to reflect his authority and his ability to have relationship and to reflect his care and compassion and love. Right? It's a mirror. It's a mirror in that garden. And as they walk around and as they live and as they love and as they serve and as they plant and as they grow, they're reflecting the heart of God himself. Now this language of image isn't just isolated here in the creation world. It's a language, it's a word that we see baked into the culture and the language throughout the Old Testament, throughout ancient history. The word for image is the same word for idol. Right? And we know what an idol is. It's a carving. It's an image. It's made to look like something. And you take that image and you set it into a temple. And that idol or that image is meant to embody or represent the deity. And when you look at the image, you're supposed to see the deity. And when you look at the image or the idol, you're supposed to see the attributes of the deity that it represents. And the deity is thought to work through that idol in the land where it's placed. Right? And we know that as an idol. It sits there and it represents something else. And it looks like something else. And they would take these idols and they would put them in the middle of a temple. And this is what it says, what Tim Mackey says. In the inner recesses of every ancient temple, you would find a statue of a god that temple was built to honor. These statues were considered physical embodiments of that God's presence and authority in the land. And they were called idols or images. So this idol is designed and it's created to represent something else, and it's put here so that everyone that looks at it can know the deity and know what he's about and what he does and how he operates in the land. And that's how they thought about idols. That's how they thought about images. And God in Exodus says, hey, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't make for yourself a carved image. Don't make for yourself an idol of any kind of likeness of a deity in the heavens above. Don't make an image, because I have already made one. I have already made an image of myself. I have made a being in my image that I have placed in the world to represent who I am on earth. Likewise, kings in the ancient time would often refer to themselves as the image of God. And they would define what is right and what is wrong and what is good and what is bad. They would make statues of themselves for everyone to look at and see and to recognize their authority and their power in that land. Think of Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel chapter 3. What does he do? He makes an image of himself to represent his rule and his authority and his reign and his power and his might. God created humans in his image to reflect to all of creation his own glory and his own love and his own compassion and his mercy and his nature and his attributes. And he takes these images, these people, and he sets them in a garden, and he says, hey, I'm not going to come and tend the garden myself, but I want you to tend to the garden like I would. I want you to tend to the garden like I would. So he sets them in the garden, and he commissions them. Here's the remarkable thing, Mackey says. In Genesis, God declared that human beings were his image. So instead of setting a statue in one specific place in the garden to symbolize his reign, he commissions living and breathing humans to be the figures that represent his rule. To be made in the image of God means we have been given God's authority to reign and to rule over creation on his behalf. So here, Adam and Eve, they're intended to rule just like God would have ruled, and they're intended to plant and to grow and to multiply and to build and to create in the same way that God would have in the garden, mirroring God's authority and his love and his might and his compassion. So he puts them in the garden and he says, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth. Subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves. Cultivate. Exercise your rule and your authority over these animals and give them names and take care of them. Just like I would. Be my representatives. So people were designed to build and grow and plant and multiply, and they were designed to take care of the world as God would. But with sin, the images that God made of himself became so marred that they're in many ways unrecognizable. Rather than using their ability and their capacity to creatively love and build and grow, suddenly they're using this capacity and ability to creatively destroy the world that God made. And they're perpetuating evil rather than reflecting the loving heart of God. We see this very clearly in chapter 11 of Genesis. Tower of Babel. They said, come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, they had bitumen for mortar, and they said, hey, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves. So here there's this great ability to design and to build and to grow, and they had this new technology. It was a brick. And they had this capacity and this skill and this talent, and instead of reflecting the glory and the wonder of God, they were seeking to steal it for themselves and make a name for themselves and govern and rule for themselves rather than reflecting the loving heart of God. And you know what, church? This grieves the heart of God. Genesis chapter 6, verse 6 simply says, it grieved God to the heart. It grieves God that the ones who were designed and created to embody good and to create and to cultivate and to serve and to reflect God to the world, it grieves him to the heart that they are now using their ability to destroy his world. Psalm 78:40 says how often they rebelled against him in the wilderness, and it grieved his heart. He wants his image back. He wants his creation back. He wants his people back. He wants you, church. He wants you. and he's come to purchase his image back and to restore it and to create something new inside of you so that you can once again be a mirror and reflect his love to the world around you as it was intended to be. In Mark chapter 12, and we went through a series on Mark recently, but in this section there's these questions that the rabbis, Pharisees, Sadducees are asking Jesus to trick him. And this is one of the questions they ask. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Should we pay them or should we not? But knowing their hypocrisy, he said, why do you put me to the test? Bring me a coin and let me look at it. They brought him one, and he said to them, whose image or whose likeness is on this coin? And they said to him, Caesar's. Jesus said, give to Caesar the thing that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God. You see, this coin was marked. It bore the image and the likeness of Caesar, and Jesus says, give it to Caesar. Church, in the same way, you are marked. You are created and you are designed to bear the likeness of God. It's baked into our DNA, and he wants his image back. He wants his people back. And he wants us to be made new so that we can once again reflect his patience and his goodness and his attributes to the world like it was intended to be. I'm going to go ahead and start the communion team on their passing out of the elements, as it can take a little while. But in the New Testament, the writers pick up on the same exact theme as they talk about Jesus and as they talk about the followers of Jesus. In Colossians chapter 1, verse 15, Jesus is described as the image of the invisible God. He is the image of God. His life, his death, his resurrection open up a new way for us to be human. Jesus demonstrates, church, the very heart and the very nature of God, and he demonstrates for us how we can serve and love and live among others as a reflection of the heart of God. Jesus shows us a new way to be human. God in Jesus is able to restore in us and through us his image. And he wants to transform me. He wants to transform you. He wants to make us new, a new creation, so that we can reflect the goodness of God. 2 Corinthians 3:18. So all of us who have had that veil removed, church, we can see and we can reflect the glory of the Lord. And the Lord, who is Spirit, makes us more and more like him as we are changed into his glorious image. As we are changed, as we are made new, as we are transformed, we can once again become the image bearers that we were intended to be. Ephesians 4:24 says, and to be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and to put on the new self created after the very likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. The new self, which is created after the likeness of God in righteousness and holiness, a renewal of our mind so that we can have a new kind of life, a new strength and a new vigor. You see, God is in the business of creating. And he wants to create a new man in us. A new image bearer. Living and breathing like God intended us to, that we might love and serve and bless and give. And we might reflect his heart to Augusta County. We're new creations, church. We're created in His image, and we've been set in this place at this time. Would you go forth from here as a mirror, serving and loving and blessing everyone that you rub shoulders with? Would you go forth reflecting the goodness and the beauty and the wonder and the splendor and the glory of our God? When they look at your life, it should be different. Why? Because you're reflecting His glory. Because you're living according to His image and not our own.